You ever notice how trouble always seems to come knocking when you least expect it? Well, for me and my wife, that knock on the door wasn't just trouble. It was the start of something we'd never forget. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where you'd expect lawnmowers on Saturday mornings, kids riding bikes in the cul-de-sac, and neighbors smiling when they wave at each other. At least that's how it should have been. But in reality, our neighborhood had a secret villain lurking behind the hedges. That villain wasn't a criminal in the traditional sense. It was the HOA. Yeah, the Homeowners Association. If you've never dealt with one, you might think I'm exaggerating. But trust me, if you've lived under one of these HOA boards run by power-hungry busybodies, you know exactly what I mean. They act like they own you. Like your property is their playground. They send out letters about the color of your front door, the height of your grass, or whether your trash can was visible for 5 minutes too long. They collect fees like it's their personal piggy bank, and heaven forbid you don't pay one on time. Now, I've had my share of arguments with our HOA before. I'm the kind of guy who doesn't just roll over when someone tries to push me around. But lately, it wasn't me they were targeting. It was my wife. See, my wife, Maria, is one of the toughest women you'll ever meet. She's not just strong in spirit, she's got a career that proves it. She's a deputy U.S. Marshal. Yeah, you heard that right. A real federal law enforcement officer. She spent years chasing fugitives, transporting dangerous criminals, and facing situations most people couldn't even imagine. But the HOA didn't care about that. Or maybe they didn't know. All they knew was that Maria didn't play their little game. She didn't bow down, she didn't lick boots, and she sure as hell wasn't going to pay some made-up fine about violating community harmony. Their words, not mine. So what did the HOA do when my wife ignored their ridiculous demands? They decided to scare us. At least they thought they could. And that's where this story begins. With a knock on the door. It was a Saturday afternoon. The sun was bright, the kind of day where you just want to relax, grill some burgers, maybe catch the game later. Maria was in the living room, sorting through a stack of files from work, and I was in the kitchen fixing myself a sandwich. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps. At first, I thought it might be a delivery. But the sound was different. It wasn't the casual knock of a UPS guy dropping off a package. It was firm, commanding, like whoever was on the other side wanted us to know they meant business. I wiped my hands, walked over to the front door, and peeked through the blinds. That's when I froze. 2 men stood there. Both in dark uniforms, badges clipped to their belts, hands resting just a little too confidently near their hips. At first glance you'd think they were cops. But something was off. Their uniforms didn't match, like they were pieced together from a surplus store. Their posture screamed wannabe. And their eyes? Well, real cops have this calm steadiness. These guys had nerves. Like they weren't used to playing the part. Still, they had the look. And for most people, that would have been enough to intimidate them. I called out to Maria. "Hey babe," I said, "you might want to see this." She looked up from her files, curious, and came over. When she saw them through the blinds, her eyes narrowed. She didn't panic. She didn't even look surprised. She just sighed like she'd been expecting something stupid like this all along. "HOA," she muttered under her breath. "Think so?" I asked. "Definitely," she replied. "They're not real cops." Now here's the thing about Maria. She has a sixth sense for this kind of stuff. She can read people in seconds, pick up on details most folks would miss. She noticed the mismatched name tags, the cheap belts, the way one of them kept adjusting his badge like he wasn't used to wearing it. She knew immediately. I opened the door, just a crack, enough to talk but not enough to invite them in. "Afternoon, gentlemen," I said. "What can I do for you?" The taller one stepped forward. He was about 6'2", broad shoulders, buzz cut. He put on his best serious face. "We're with the local police department," he said. "We need to speak with the homeowner about some violations." Violations. That word was a dead giveaway. Real cops don't show up at your door for HOA violations. I kept my cool. "Which department did you say you were with?" I asked. The guy hesitated. Just for a split second, but I caught it. Then he said, "Community Enforcement Division." I almost laughed. Community Enforcement Division? That's not even a thing. But I held it in. Maria stepped up beside me, her presence alone shifting the entire energy. She looked the guy straight in the eye. "Community Enforcement Division?" she repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. "That's cute." The shorter guy fidgeted, glancing between us. The taller one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need you to step outside. We have orders from the association." And there it was. The mask slipped. He said it out loud. Orders from the association. Not the city, not the county, not the state. The HOA. Maria crossed her arms. So you're admitting you're here on behalf of the HOA, not law enforcement. They shifted uncomfortably, realizing they'd screwed up. But instead of backing down, the tall one doubled down. Ma'am, you can make this easy or hard. If you don't comply, there will be consequences. That's when Maria smiled. And let me tell you, when my wife smiles like that, it's not the kind of smile that makes you feel warm inside. It's the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out her badge wallet, and flipped it open with one smooth motion. The gold gleam of the U.S. Marshal Service badge caught the sunlight. You want to talk about consequences? She said calmly. Impersonating a law enforcement officer is a federal crime. You boys sure you want to keep going down this road? I swear I've never seen two grown men's faces drain of color so fast. The short one stammered. We're just here to talk. But Maria wasn't done. She took a step closer, holding the badge steady so they could see every detail. You lied about being police officers. You tried to intimidate me and my husband. And you just admitted you're acting under the orders of a private association. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in right now? The tall one swallowed hard. His tough guy act was crumbling. He glanced at his buddy, then back at Maria, then finally took a step back. We'll come back, he muttered. No, Maria shot back. You won't. And just like that, the two of them turned and walked quickly down the driveway. Not quite running, but close. The moment they hit the sidewalk, Maria shut the door, shook her head, and muttered, "Idiots." I couldn't help but laugh. You didn't even have to raise your voice. That's the thing about people who fake authority, she said, slipping her badge back into her pocket. They fold the second they run into the real deal. But here's the part that still sticks with me. Maria wasn't relieved after they left. She wasn't smiling about the win. She was serious. Almost too serious. They're not gonna stop, she said quietly. The HOA crossed a line tonight. And once people like that cross a line, they don't just walk away. They'll escalate. And you know what? She was right. Because that night was just the beginning. The two fake cops might have walked away from our door that afternoon, but they left behind a storm that was already brewing. Maria knew it. I could see it in her eyes. She'd dealt with gangs, fugitives, and organized crime syndicates in her career as a U.S. Marshal. She knew when something wasn't finished, and she was never wrong. I was hoping maybe she'd be wrong just this once. Maybe the HOA realized they'd pushed things too far and would crawl back into their little hole. But deep down, I knew better too. Because when people like that get embarrassed, when their scare tactics fail, they don't just give up. They double down. The first sign came 2 days later. I was pulling into the driveway after work, just a normal Tuesday, when I noticed a bright orange sticker slapped across our mailbox. Big bold letters read, "Violation Notice." I ripped it off and scanned it. According to the HOA, we were being fined $500 for failure to maintain harmonious property standards. Now let me paint a picture for you. Our yard? Perfectly mowed. The flower beds? Trimmed. Trash cans? Neatly tucked away. Everything about our place looked better than half the houses on the block. But harmonious property standards? That's not even a real rule. It's made-up nonsense, something vague they could use however they wanted. Maria came out just as I was crumpling up the notice. She didn't even look surprised. "First shot fired," she said. "They're really doing this?" I asked. "They're testing us," she replied. "They couldn't scare us with their fake cops, so now they're trying to bury us in fines." And she was right. Because over the next week, more notices came. One about our front light being too bright. Another about garage door noise. They even claimed our mailbox was painted the wrong shade of black. I didn't even know there were shades of black. Each violation came with a fine. And each fine came with a deadline. Pay or else. But here's the thing. Maria wasn't paying a dime. She stacked the notices in a neat pile on the kitchen counter, almost like trophies. "Every one of these is illegal," she told me. "And if they want to play legal games, they picked the wrong person." Now, I've always admired how fearless my wife is, but that doesn't mean I wasn't worried. Because while she was calm, I knew the HOA wasn't just going to stick to paper fines. They'd already tried intimidation once and failed. What came next? The answer came on a Friday night. We just sat down to dinner when the doorbell rang. I groaned, thinking it was another one of those HOA clowns. But when I opened the door, it wasn't fake cops this time. It was the real thing. A uniformed officer, badge, patrol car parked at the curb. "Evening," he said politely. "Are you the homeowner?" "Yeah, that's me," I replied cautiously. He nodded. "We got a call about a disturbance. Neighbors reported yelling, possible domestic situation. My stomach dropped. I looked back at Maria, who was sitting at the table calm as ever. "Officer, we've been sitting here eating dinner. There's no disturbance." He glanced past me like he was checking for signs. "Mind if I step in and take a look?" Maria stood and walked over, flashing her Marshal's badge. "That won't be necessary, officer. We're fine. But I'd love to know who made that call." The officer looked at the badge, blinked, and immediately shifted his tone. "Ah, I see. I can't disclose the caller, ma'am, but it came from a neighbor on this block." Maria's jaw tightened. She thanked the officer for his time, and he left without pushing further. The second the door closed, she turned to me. "That wasn't random. That was the HOA. And that was when it clicked. They weren't just harassing us with fines. They were weaponizing the police. It's one thing to send fake cops to your door. It's another to trick real ones into showing up by filing false reports." Maria picked up her phone and started making calls, not to complain but to document. She knew the system. Every report, every incident had to be logged. And if the HOA wanted to play dirty, she was going to make sure there was a trail. The following week, things escalated even further. I was pulling the trash cans in from the curb when I noticed 3 people standing across the street watching me. Clipboards in hand, phones out, whispering to each other. They weren't neighbors I recognized. Later, Maria confirmed they were HOA board members. They weren't even hiding anymore. They were surveilling us. That night, Maria sat me down. "They're trying to build a case. They want to push us into a corner where either we break a rule for real, or they can claim we're hostile to the community. So what do we do?" I asked. She looked me dead in the eyes. "We don't back down. But we don't take the bait either. Let me handle this." Now, when my wife says she'll handle something, I believe her. But I wasn't prepared for just how far she'd go. The next day, Maria showed up to the HOA office. She walked in during their board meeting, badge in hand, calm but firm. "Gentlemen," she said, "ladies, I want to make something clear. What you're doing is harassment. Sending imposters to impersonate officers is a federal offense. Filing false police reports is a crime. And if I receive one more fraudulent violation notice, I'll personally see to it that every one of you is investigated." You could have heard a pin drop. These people were used to bullying homeowners, but they weren't used to someone calling them out with authority. One of the board members, a thin man with glasses, tried to speak. We're just enforcing community standards." Maria leaned forward. "No, you're abusing your power. And I promise you, if you don't stop, I will shut this entire board down." She left them speechless, then turned and walked out. When she told me what happened, I'll admit I was nervous. "You think they'll listen?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, people like that never do. They'll come back harder. But now they know I'm not bluffing." And she was right again. Because the very next week, we woke up to something we never expected. Spray paint. Someone had tagged our garage door in red letters, "Snitch." I stood there in shock, staring at the dripping paint, my fists clenched. This is it. They've gone too far. Maria, though, stayed calm. Too calm. She took pictures, logged the damage, and called in a favor from the local PD. A detective came out, filed a vandalism report, and promised to pull security camera footage from nearby houses. But Maria knew. This wasn't random vandalism. It was targeted. And she knew exactly who was behind it. The HOA wasn't just playing petty games anymore. They were making it personal. That night, Maria sat me down again. Her voice was steady, but there was steel in it. "They think they can scare us. They think spray paint and fines and fake cops will make us back down. But they don't understand something." "What's that?" I asked. She leaned in, her eyes locked on mine. "I don't scare. And I don't lose." And with that, she started planning. Because Maria wasn't just going to defend us. She was going to take the fight straight to them. And let me tell you, what came next would shake the entire neighborhood to its core. You ever notice how bullies never stop until someone stands up to them? That was the HOA. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they could fine us into the ground, intimidate us with fake cops, even vandalize our home, and we'd just fold. But what they didn't understand was this. My wife wasn't just any homeowner. She was a deputy U.S. Marshal. And she didn't believe in losing. The morning after we found the spray paint, Maria was up before dawn. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, stacks of documents spread out like she was preparing for trial. I walked in half asleep and asked what she was doing. "Building a case," she said simply. See, Maria knew the HOA wasn't just annoying us. What they were doing was criminal. Impersonating officers. Filing false reports. Harassment. Vandalism. She wasn't going to fight them with anger. She was going to fight them with facts, evidence, and the law. She spent days gathering everything. Copies of every violation notice. Records of every police call. Photos of the fake cops. The vandalism report. Witness statements from neighbors who saw the board members skulking around with clipboards. She even pulled the HOA's own bylaws, highlighting all the ways they were breaking their own rules. Meanwhile, the harassment didn't stop. More fake violation letters showed up. Someone parked a car across our driveway to block us in. We even got anonymous notes shoved under the door telling us to get out before things get worse. But Maria didn't flinch. If anything, the more they tried to scare us, the calmer she became. One night I asked her, "How are you not furious right now?" She looked at me with that steady gaze of hers. "Because anger makes you sloppy. If I let them get to me, they win. But if I stay focused, I'll bury them." And she meant it. The big moment came 2 weeks later. That's when the HOA held its monthly community meeting. Normally those meetings were boring, a bunch of people complaining about weeds or paint colors, but this one was different. Word had spread about the spray paint on our garage, about the fake cops, about the police being called to our house for no reason. Neighbors were starting to ask questions. Maria knew it was the perfect time. She walked into that meeting not as a neighbor, not as a victim, but as a federal officer. She wasn't there to plead her case. She was there to drop the hammer. The HOA board sat at the front table, smug as ever. The president, a heavy-set man named Carl with a permanent scowl, tried to start the meeting like nothing was wrong. But Maria didn't let him. She stood up, pulled out a thick folder, and walked straight to the front. "Before you start," she said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I have something to share." Carl frowned. "Ma'am, this is a closed board agenda. If you have a complaint, you can submit it in writing." Maria ignored him. She laid the folder on the table, flipped it open, and pulled out a stack of papers. "What I have here," she said clearly, "is evidence of multiple crimes committed by this board." The room went silent. Maria held up one of the fake violation notices. "Here's a fabricated fine with no basis in your bylaws. Illegal." She dropped it on the table. Then she held up photos of the fake cops. "Here are 2 men impersonating police officers, sent to my door by members of this board. That's a federal offense." She dropped the photos. The board members started shifting nervously, whispering to each other. Maria wasn't done. She held up the police report from the false domestic disturbance call. "Here's a documented false report filed against us, wasting real police resources and putting my family at risk." She dropped it. Then the vandalism report. "And here's evidence of criminal damage to my property, consistent with the ongoing harassment we've endured from this association." The neighbors gasped. People started murmuring, looking at the board with suspicion. Maria leaned forward, her voice steady but fierce. "You people think you can bully homeowners into submission. You think you can use fake rules, fake cops, and fake authority to line your pockets and scare families. But you made a mistake." She pulled out her badge and held it up. "You picked the wrong house." The room erupted. Some neighbors cheered. Others demanded answers from the board. Carl tried to pound his gavel, shouting for order, but no one was listening to him anymore. Maria let the noise settle, then delivered the final blow. "I have already turned this evidence over to the county prosecutor's office. Impersonation of law enforcement, harassment, vandalism, fraud. You will all be investigated. And until that process is complete, I am formally petitioning for a vote to dissolve this HOA board effective immediately." Now, if you don't know how HOAs work, here's the thing. The homeowners, the actual residents, have the power to vote out the board if they want. And in that moment, with the whole neighborhood furious, Maria knew she had the numbers. Hands shot up across the room. People who had been silent for years suddenly found their voices. They were tired of the board's nonsense too. The intimidation. The arbitrary fines. The power trips. Maria had given them the courage to fight back. When the vote was counted, it wasn't even close. The board was dissolved on the spot. Carl and his cronies were forced to pack up their papers and leave the room humiliated. But Maria wasn't finished. She turned to the neighbors and said, "I didn't come here to run your community. That's not my job. My job is to protect my family. But if you want a community that's fair, transparent, and safe, then you need to take back control. Don't let bullies run this place ever again." The room erupted in applause. People came up to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her they finally felt free. As we walked out that night, I looked at Maria and said, "You didn't just beat them. You changed everything." She smiled, that calm, confident smile I love. That's what happens when you stand up to bullies. They only have power if you let them. In the weeks that followed, things changed fast. The county launched an investigation into the old board. Word was, at least 2 of them were facing real charges for the impersonation stunt. The fines against us were dropped, erased from the record. And for the first time since we'd moved into that neighborhood, people actually started acting like neighbors again. No more harassment. No more surveillance. Just a quiet street where kids rode bikes, people waved when they passed by, and everyone finally felt free from the shadow of the HOA. One evening, a neighbor stopped me while I was mowing the lawn. He said, "You know, your wife didn't just save you guys. She saved all of us." And he was right. Because what Maria did wasn't just about us. It was about showing an entire community that they didn't have to live in fear. That they could stand up, fight back, and win. Now, whenever I think back to that day the fake cops showed up at our door, I can't help but laugh. They thought they could intimidate us. They thought they could scare my wife. But the second she flashed that Marshal's badge, they ran like the cowards they were. And that was the beginning of the end for the HOA. Because in the end, the lesson was simple. You can't fake authority. You can't fake power. And when you mess with a US Marshal, you better be ready to pay the price. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this wild HOA story, make sure to like the video, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.